I'm Isla Scritchfield.
And I'm Audrey Scritchfield.
Won't you help a child in need this holiday
by donating to Playtime Project?
Hey listeners, once again, my family and I are collaborating with Playtime Project to help bring much needed toys, family goods, and love and kindness to over 400 children who are experiencing homelessness in DC this holiday season. Visit playtimeproject.org to learn more about them, or go right to their wish list at wishlist.playtimeproject.org. Now it's easier than ever to scroll and see what items are needed in order to help these families have a safer and happier holiday season. This is the third year that our family has been supporting this organization, and I promise you that any effort you can make to support them makes a significant difference. The mission of the Homeless Children's Playtime Project is to cultivate resilience in children experiencing family homelessness by providing and expanding access to transformative play experiences. And we know that this makes a significant difference in the well-being of children's lives. Again, that's wishlist.playtimeproject.org, and you can grab a link for that in the show notes of this episode. Thank you so much, and
Happy Holidays!
Welcome to Body Kindness Listener Q&A.
We're answering challenging questions from Body Kindness readers and listeners.
I'm Rebecca Scritchfield.
And I'm Bernie Salazar.
Send us your question today at bodykindnessbook.com/question. Hey, Bernie, what's up?
Hey, Becca, it is so good to finally be back on the podcast. And I say that because it has been a crazy end of the year. Let me tell you.
Yeah. You've had quite the whirlwind as your brood is growing. So how are you hanging in there?
Yeah, parenting for all our parents out there, people who know parents, who have parents. It is quite the wonderful challenge. And wonderful is in air quotes right now. As much as I absolutely love that my little brood has grown, it has proven difficult. There's no sleep. I love every minute of it, but I'm also really in need of just some grown-up talk time.
Yeah. No, I mean, in writing Body Kindness and having 2 kids under 3, I was definitely talking to myself the whole time. And it is no joke. And there are those happy moments, obviously, right? But it's almost like we're complaining if we if we tell the truth.
That, right? Like you can't. And you know what? I'm glad that you said that, because anybody out there who's a parent, and believe me, we have super parents. I am not claiming to be one of them. I appreciate what you just said, because no one wants to hear, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, or this or that. But you know what? Like, we have to create a space where we can be honest about the fact that, like, although we are super excited and feel so blessed, that it's a lot of darn work. And there are a lot of sleepless nights, and it's not all cute and bonnets and little happy strollers. It is some work. I am looking forward to this little guy
sleeping
through the night. Yeah, first steps first. Sleeping would be great. No, absolutely. And it's one of those things where I just wanted to make sure I was being honest about it. I am so excited he's here, but man, he's beating us up. And it's cool because he's already different from number 1.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my 2 girls were very different too. And I don't want to make you jealous, but I slept like 13 hours last night.
Oh, you are so lucky.
Yes, but I have been sick for like over a week, and I think I've actually had several different things happening, like something GI wise, because it wasn't just a straight up cold. It started out something that felt like it would be a cold, but then it moved to GI. And that was really bothersome, but just roll with it, try to do the best you can. And then it came back around to like one of those hard and fast knock you out colds, like you're sweating and shivering at the same time.
It's the season. And I'm telling our listeners, I know you guys can relate, especially if you have, if you go anywhere in public, you're most likely going to get something around this time of year. And It's brutal. So I'm sorry to hear that you're not feeling well. I'm glad that we're spending some time together because honestly, this helps to really ground me. And I hope that it does too for our listeners, in our crazy, hectic, chaotic worlds of not just family and illness, but also the holidays. Can we talk about how that can go ahead and add a different level of stress as well? So I see you listeners out there, and I'm so glad that you hopped on today to listen to us because we're answering your questions, and they're good ones.
Yeah, they're really good. And I'm so grateful that people have questions to bring to the table. And I really enjoy kind of digging into finding out the barriers that are existing. And it's when I counsel clients, we have conversations around putting body kindness into practice. And it's not as simple as, oh, let me just read the spiral up in the book and everything will be fine.
Yeah, right? No, and every time we get questions submitted, Rebecca, it makes me really reflect on my journey. And it also helps me to reframe some of the thoughts that I have in my head as I continue growing myself in this journey. So again, listeners, we appreciate them. Keep sending them. I'm going to just jump in, Rebecca. We have a really great first one from Sara. And Sara asks, for various reasons, I've become very detached from my body. I find that it's a source of stress due to body image, lack of control, feeling weak and out of shape, and likely trauma from pregnancy and birth. I deal with it by basically just trying not to think about it. I give it the bare minimum for survival instead of treating it like a friend and companion that deserves care and respect. How do I get started getting reacquainted and developing a better relationship with my body so that I can take better care of it? Where do I begin? Food? Exercise? Yoga? I feel so lost.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. And there's a lot of, I'm grateful that she's reaching out to try to get some information, but even how it's basically guide me to a starting point. And what I would honestly say is that I would say that there is probably one important step that almost everyone would need to do. And I think it's some version of I'm sorry and it's okay. We both, through our different times, have written apology letters to our body. Well, you rapped yours out. That was so cool.
Yeah.
So we'll include the link to that Learn and Grow in the show notes for sure. But what's good about her question is that she describes avoidance. So she talks about detachment. She talks about acknowledging that there was a trauma related to her pregnancy and birth. So there's probably some unresolved trauma work that needs to get done. For that, I really recommend trauma-informed type of a care team. So there are trauma-informed dietitians who might be able to help you with food or well-being related aspects related to your trauma that are important, but it also might require working with a trauma-informed therapist or a team type of approach. But what she talks about, like, I deal with it by trying not to think about it. And so we know in body kindness, you can't control your thoughts. And the more you say, don't, you actually increase your thoughts. And so, but it's also a stage of avoidance. And it is common to want to run away from painful emotions. And what's likely happening is she's dealing with intrusive, negative thoughts about her body or what she does to take care of it or her worthiness as a person or as a mother, perhaps. We don't have those details, but the fact that she's trying to not think about these things that bother her, we can acknowledge that as avoidance and that's a way that we try to get out of pain. But really the only way out is through it, is changing how we relate to it. And that's where I think this kind of truce pattern of just simple words, 4 simple words. I'm sorry and it's okay. It's almost like letting you drop the rope in the tug of war that you might be having, whether you're shooting on yourself about behaviors that you feel disappointed in, but rather than say, gosh, I know movement is important. I know it helps me feel good and I haven't done anything in several months. We can observe that and say, okay, well, that's an observation. What do I want to do tomorrow? What's the next best self-care choice I can make? But if we are feeling a lot of shame and blame around what we haven't done around it, well, you should have been working out all this time. Yeah. It creates more pain and more wanting to run away and avoid. And so that's why this truce step, I think, is really key.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here because what I'm seeing is something that I definitely went through in a different way, but can relate. For me, it was very numbing. Do you remember those conversations where
Oh,
I
yeah.
talked about how I couldn't enjoy the good. I didn't feel the bad. I just kind of tuned out and was numb to all of it. And it left me literally just living a very monotone kind of life. One where, like, is somewhat described here, where it was just trying to just not think about it, trying to just get through things. And I know that that's a really hard place to be, Sarah. So, I mean, I agree with Rebecca. First of all, I want to go ahead and just congratulate you for writing in and for acknowledging that this is how you're feeling, because for me that was a big step. And I remember that's kind of the point where I reached out to Rebecca and was like, I don't know what's going on with me. I just know I'm not feeling anything and I don't want to feel anything. So that was a really big step for me. I also know that being able to acknowledge just where I was a big step for me, because I literally spent years not even wanting to acknowledge that I needed to maybe talk to somebody. And then that apology letter, like you shared, Rebecca, was huge for me. And it took a long time for me to really even want to sit down at the table and write a letter to myself. And then when I did, it ended up just coming out how it came out. But I remember that being really challenging, just the thought of it. Because I was like, what do you mean apologize to myself for what? Like, I don't get it. Like, and then you start doing it and it's just so emotional. For me, it was just so emotional to dig that deep. Because Sarah, you're talking about just trauma from pregnancy and birth. And I am a male and I can't even pretend to know anything about how that is. I just know that I've done my best to try to support my wife through that. And just so many hugs sent your way.
Yeah. And I just also want to highlight there's a possibility of maybe postpartum depression. And that's something that, again, we don't always know the signs. So I would encourage Sarah or anyone who's feeling like Sarah, if you've recently given birth, talk to somebody about how you're feeling. You're not failing at motherhood. Talk to somebody. Your OBGYN should be able to help screen for postpartum depression and help connect you with somebody who could be helpful. And also, it could be depression, right? So it could be somebody who feels similar to Sarah, who hasn't had a baby, but is feeling this detachment, is feeling this avoidance,
Yes.
is feeling that they're criticizing themselves. And again, like, I think we have these visions. First of all, there's a stigma around mental health, but then we have these visions of what depression is supposed to look like. And it doesn't always look like someone who can't get out of bed and engage in the world. You know, it can look like somebody who actually looks very put together,
Right.
you know, putting a mask on.
That's a really good point. And I'm glad you're acknowledging that. That's really powerful. So, and then another thing, I just wanted to jump in because at the end she says, you know, like, where do I begin? And I remember being that person, like, asking for the roadmap, like, where do I start? How do I do it? And Sarah, for me, and Rebecca, I don't know if you'll agree that this was how you saw part of my journey, but what made the most sense and what had the largest impact was me beginning by looking for the good in the day-to-day and finding ways to enjoy life more than I had been. And what I mean by that is whether it was food, like actually trying to not place any type of a significant stigma or thought behind everything that I was trying to put in my body. Exercise, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I need to get to a certain class or gym or do a certain workout. It was just, what foods make me feel good? What exercise, what movement makes me feel like I'm re-entering into the world? And whether that was walks or anything. So that kind of, you know, you mentioned yoga. If that's something that brings you joy and lets you kind of take some time for yourself, then I think for me, I was looking for a definite roadmap, and I found that my map consisted of me trying to just reconnect with myself first and the world second.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And it's also interesting about her question is that what she's talking about is getting reacquainted and developing a better relationship with my body so that I can take better care of it. And it reminds me of the quote the curious paradox is once I accept myself, then I can change. And so I find that to be interesting, that and being lost about what the approach is. The truth is, like you just said, it's what she has a sense of could help induce a spiral up. And I would really encourage to just try to reduce expectations, right?
Yes.
So she brought up yoga, and yeah, we could talk about the science of that yoga means breath, and that restorative yoga and connecting to breath. And I have personal lived experience with yoga being very powerful. But I would say that you might think of yoga if you have a positive memory of yoga, and if it's something that you could do, it's accessible to you, whether it's a class that you can get away to or something that you could do in 10 minutes at home. Absolutely try that if you're curious and interested. But what are you expecting, right? Are you expecting that yoga is going to be so powerful that you walk out a totally new person? Or will you say, you know what, I'm not sure how I'm going to feel after this yoga, but I know that right now I have 10 minutes to do some restorative yoga poses that I remember, and I'm going to focus on my breath, and I'm going to focus on my desire to be better connected to my body. And in that present moment, keeping the expectation there, all you're really asking yourself is to do the breath and to do the poses and remember why you're there. Remember your value of aiming for a better connection so that you can reflect after, right? If you can let good enough be good enough, this is what I was able to do right now and I'm satisfied. And what am I going to do next? What am I going to do tomorrow, right? Because we know that life is chaotic. If we have a better expectation and reflection of reasonable satisfaction, we're actually practicing taking better care of our body. And that is what is actually healing the relationship with the body, not I have to have a solid relationship and then I'll effortlessly do all the things to take care of it. Do you get what I'm saying there?
Really, really well said, because I know that that's where I was for a long time. Was once I have this better connection, I'm going to start doing this. Once I have the body shape that I want, I'm going to start dressing the way I've always wanted to dress. I mean, all these things, it's like, no, you're worthy now.
Yeah.
Your body is the right shape for you to dress it the way you want, to do the things you want to do, to be in the places and around the company that you want to keep. Like right now, you are more than ready to do those things. And far too often, I know that for me, it was like, once I, really take care of this first, then everything else will follow. And that wasn't the case for me. I just remember trying to really simplify my world in finding the things, and not that I even knew. I had to look for things that I found pleasure in because I was so detached. I didn't even know what that was. Mm-hmm. And then I remember kind of slowly starting to just explore what brought me joy again. Yeah. And it was not easy. Even that wasn't easy. But once I found a few things that led to other things, and it was putting in the work initially to just find what brought me joy. Yeah. Does that resonate with you or with our listeners? Because I was so detached and so numb that I couldn't even tell you what. Like if somebody would have been like, hey, what are you into? What do you enjoy? I didn't have an answer. It was that. Right. I was that detached.
Yeah, I literally think that you're creating the frames for connecting, right? Disconnecting from diet culture and reconnecting these ideas around joy, which I have to say, it's reminding me of the Joy of Movement, which is going to be an upcoming podcast with Kelly McGonigal, who's the author of The Upside of Stress. We we already recorded. It's a great chat, but
I'm jealous. I was not on that. I'm so jealous. I'm a huge Dr. McGonigal fan.
Yeah, she's awesome. And you're a story in her book about joy and movement.
How cool is that? And guys, man, what an honor. Like Rebecca, I wouldn't have thought like the 4 years ago that we started this podcast that I would be able to kind of speak to this and share my story and to be able to have that outlet, and hopefully our listeners find value in it. I know that it's been extremely helpful and therapeutic for me, so I almost feel selfish in it. But man, what an honor all around.
Yeah, and I think part of the story that she included with you is finding joyful movement and connecting to your daughter.
Yes.
So I think that's really cool.
Well, I hope that they pick it up because now we have one more member that's going to be joining that party, and you'll understand if you pick that book up.
Oh, yeah, the dance party. Okay, so I do want to say something really quickly about food because she's asking like which one to take first, and it's hard when I don't have a client to be able to know deeply what's going on. But generally speaking, a lot of times people are restricting and they don't realize that they're restricting. So whether their appetite is off related to the disconnection, possible depression, or just like who wants to go through the effort, maybe you're tired, you talked about being stressed, or if you talked about lack of control. So if there's any feelings of lack of control around food, usually the cycle is, oh, I promise I'll be good. But you go into restriction mode again, right? And the pendulum swings back and forth. So I will say that think a little bit harder about what your relationship to food is like right now. Intuitive eating is wonderful, but, right, here's my but, pivot point. People who do well with intuitive eating have high levels of attunement. So there's an association, like an attunement to hunger, to fullness, to satisfaction. And it might be that right now these things seem pretty inaccessible to you because of lots of other things going on. And so know that intuitive eating is definitely, that's the philosophy of body kindness wholly supports intuitive eating as the way of eating, like that structural way of eating. And you might be in a place where what is more helpful for your body kindness practice is to have a food schedule so that you don't skip meals or snacks, so that you get kind of steady nourishment throughout your day, and that you can make kind of fewer decisions around food, right? So people who are trying to do intuitive eating perfectly or intuitive eating right out of the gate, it may actually be that you need some different tools. So I just, not hearing too much, you just mentioned food and out of control. So without knowing specifics, I would say if you're skipping any meal, so most people need to eat at least 3 times a day. And then snacks are like between meals for like energy needs or interests. And definitely if you're hungry, then you eat a snack to bridge between a meal. But that's just very general advice. But like I've definitely had clients who come in, they skip breakfast. They're lucky if they eat 1 or 2 times a day. Like that, we know you're not meeting your energy needs. And if that is happening, I would see what you could do to actually start with food. Don't worry about progressing with food before moving on the movement piece or whatever, but you do want some amount of commitment to sitting down and having meals throughout the day that will then help enhance your physical energy. It will help you deal with your stress. It should even help you with your mood. You heard about being hangry. So it should help with all those things. And even doing that restorative yoga for a short amount of time, it will help you get into a calm and peaceful place for that as well. So I just wanted to make sure that I didn't blow off food like, it's no big deal. Whatever you do with food, it's fine. Like you ultimately have to decide what you think you can take meaningful action on. And it really doesn't matter. Just start somewhere. So in the food category, it might be, I've been skipping breakfast. Instead, today I'm going to have a banana or a piece of toast, and that's better than nothing. And then what can I do next? Get yourself off of the extremes, but know that we need food for so many important reasons for physical and mental health, way outside and beyond of intuitive eating.
Absolutely. And I love that it's even just starting, like reaching for something, giving yourself credit for that. That's really helped me out instead of being like, oh, I can just get in a banana. Yeah. It's like, oh, check you out. You're actually making the effort and you're taking care of yourself to get something in. And it's just reframing what it is we are doing for ourselves that's really helped me out. Is it cool if we move on? I really love this next question.
Yep,
I don't know if too many of our listeners know, but my background is in education. Cool. So this one really resonated with me. So it's Melissa, and she asks, I'm a high school teacher. I often hear students, mostly girls, comment about their bodies and what they should or shouldn't eat. Some students even tell me that they're on a diet or they're doing keto. I try to be a good role model, but is there something I can say to students in that moment to encourage them to just be kind to themselves? I know, right? I don't even know what to say. I'm just going to wait to hear what you say, and then I'm going to jump in because this one, it just tugs at me big time. Yeah. Especially because I'm the father of a father, period. All right, go ahead. I'm going to be quiet.
No, well, I know you have a background in education, and so I'm curious to hear your standpoint too. But I'm probably going to answer in a way that you don't necessarily expect because I'm going to avoid answering her question 100%. So the person who asked this question is pivoting to like, okay, well, what can I say that might encourage them to be kind to themselves? And that intention makes so much sense. And we are going to talk about that because you can take immediate action. But what I would point out is the fact that you're a high school teacher, you are part of this important system, and it's the school system. And that means you have a power that others don't have being in this school system. You have awareness about body kindness that other people don't. And there are actually really powerful ways that you can help on the systemic level make it so that you're creating a community that values, you get what I'm saying? You're creating a community that values well-being enhancement for all.
Preach it. I love it. Yes. And man, that just makes me happy to hear because that's exciting stuff. And, Melissa, I know that Rebecca joked about not answering your question directly, but man, is that powerful. Mm-hmm. How much would I have loved as a student to be able to know that I was going into a teacher's classroom who created a safe space for all bodies and who was advocating within that system to hopefully incorporate that into maybe the whole school or schools or the system itself. But I know that as a teacher, you are on the front line. I absolutely adore teachers. I know that you guys are unsung heroes, but even to be able to create that space is so huge. And when I say create that space, it's your students obviously care and trust enough in you to even share that they're dieting or they're trying something. So that in and of itself means that you are connecting with your students, which is super powerful. But Rebecca, what you said about knowing the system as a teacher and being able to try to make those steps and create systemic change, man, would that be a beautiful and powerful thing.
Yeah. And, I have a couple basic ideas. Always trust that your voice is your power. And if you go into it with that in mind, okay, think about the meetings that are already existing. Think about the networks that are already happening. So, for example, a lot of schools have school wellness policies. And I would take a look at what your school wellness policy is, and I would make sure that you have eating disorder prevention as part of your school wellness policy. And this can be a gateway to have information in there about weight stigma and size diversity in health for teachers, faculty, students, to part of that, creating that community and that environment. And earlier this year, I had the privilege of being part of a visit to Capitol Hill with the National Eating Disorder Association. And essentially, that's what we were advocating for. So we were speaking to legislators about the value and importance of including eating disorder prevention in school wellness policy. So we would like to see that legislated because then it's a system. Policy is a system. It's a lot easier if legislators go back to their states and make that the policy that it must be included, then the schools that are following the guidelines they have to include it because it's a law. So that's one angle. And I am going to include the contact information for Nita in the show notes here so that anyone who's listening and wants to connect through Nita and make actions in your own state. I know they just recently introduced some bills in Massachusetts that are looking at this. And so they're actively moving forward. And this, I think, is something that you could begin to do. Like, don't wait for the laws to exist. Look at your school wellness policy. If there isn't one, do you want to be part to create one and include eating disorder prevention as part of that? Yeah. And you can get information from Nita on strategy or what to include. Like, we can help with that element of it. But at the end of the day, if students know I am walking into this environment where well-being is valued, where we're anti-bullying, where we're about love and respect and kindness for all, right? And we buy into those values, then there's going to be ways in which we have assemblies and conversations and
Absolutely.
classroom assignments or whatever, right? There's all these different arms of like
just an all-inclusive curriculum. I mean, there's so much that can be done. I imagine, like on the first day of class, Rebecca, when our teachers have up signs and welcome and this and that, like how powerful would an everybody is welcome here sign be?
And then the other thing that I'm thinking about is, and we'll get to what she could say, but yes, the adults, look, like we all know that it's a teen's job to ignore the adults and say like, I don't care about you or whatever, but they actually do care. Even teens, they act rebellious, but they actually care a lot about how are the adults treating them. So yes, we should all do our thing as adults. And look, you as a teacher who's Hays and body kindness informed, you might have some convincing to do because they still might be talking about O-word type of programs and initiatives. And so it's like, there could possibly be some work ahead and just, can you have some book club type meetings with the other faculty to help them understand what is helpful in this type of environment? And so individual teachers can kind of do their own thing. You do unified things where possible. But the last piece, I think, as well, is understanding that teens also need peer-led programs and initiatives. And so you've got to find who are your influencers in all the different groups, right? In the band group and the jock group and the cool person group and the nerd group, whatever. You've got to find who are your peer leaders in these different groups, and can you get them interested and involved in leadership roles, right? And certainly something that's anti-diet culture, but including people who are marginalized. So I'm thinking of higher weight people, I'm thinking of people of color, and where there can be peer-led programs and initiatives and activities where they're saying to each other, hey, this is something that we care about. And so whether it's the umbrella is well-being and part of the arm is like anti-bullying and like body diversity and respect, positive self-care, and under that is like we don't diet or restrict our food. So how that looks specifically should be part. You always want to center and include the needs of the people you're trying to help. So if you're trying to help students, you need to center their needs and include them. And you may have this peer group going, and you may have at least one or two people from that peer group be a liaison to the faculty and what they're doing so that there's just kind of cross-pollination going. And that is literally how it becomes a thing of the school, right? Not some, oh, look at the adults are trying to make us, because we have a society that encourages dieting, we can see it, right? When puberty starts, right, girls become women and that's when we become like $ sales for diet culture. So I'm talking 8, 9, 10, 11, way too early, right? It becomes this thing. There is a certain developmental appropriateness of teens who, and it's hormone related plus culture, right? But we become kind of hyper aware. Like, do I have a wedgie? Is there anything in my teeth? Right. And like, if there is that big green thing in your teeth, I'm mortified, right? Whereas an adult, you can kind of blow it off a little bit easier. So there's this hyper awareness that is partially normal in teens. And I'll include the link to the Rachel Simmons interview where we talked about this on the Body Kindness podcast. But they aren't necessarily aware of diet culture and the harms of diet culture. So there's still education to do. But just note, like, really think and talk to the teens. Like, what are your goals while you're in this school, right? Because while we all want to see diet culture go away, is it more like we want this school to be a place where we learn and practice collective well-being? And that includes positive, compassionate movement and opportunities to do that. And that includes eating and socializing and getting our nourishment and getting energy. So anyway, and I think they'll find a way to kind of like battle it out, the keto versus this and that. It's just it's a trend, and like any trend, right? With our kids, oh, I want this toy, right? Because they're little. But they hit puberty, dieting is going to be the trend. And so it's how do we help build a resilience to it? And part of it is how do we make this a place where we value something bigger?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to jump in really quick. And Rebecca, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm sure you have, but society is slowly moving forward in a positive way in body acceptance. I mean, we're seeing, because I was going to jump right in and just say, but Rebecca, she also has to contend with social media and what's being put out there. But right now, there's some musicians out there that are really kind of blazing a path forward into body acceptance and owning who they are, all of them. And for me as an educator, even having a teacher that is applauding an Ashley Graham or Chrissy Teigen and some of the things that she's saying, and also like a Lizzo, like, I mean, these are people that are really owning their body type. And that's something that I never experienced or saw. To be able to talk about things, I think that as educators, there's certain topics that we just kind of, and it's just natural, right? You just tend to stay away from. But to be able, if we're going to highlight, let's say, a sports figure whose body is doing what it needs for them to do as a professional athlete, let's talk about different bodies that are also doing what they need to for those different artists or athletes or professionals. So that to me is important. To be able to not be quiet on certain things is in and of itself such a statement.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think use your powerful voice for educational purposes, and especially at the high school level. I mean, people are writing papers, they're reading books, right? And we think about, how do we want to prep the high schooler for what's next? And,
Yes.
and that I don't think that we're at a day and age where we can have kids in high school and not be talking about anti-oppression or racism. And these are topics that we're not doing a good job at talking about. And so anywhere where that might exist in the curriculum or in school values, diet culture, weight stigma, size diversity is part of the anti-oppression conversation. I'm going to include a link. I'm making notes. I have a post-it note of all these links I'm promising. But one is to Simmons University, and it was put out by the librarians. And it's great. I'm sharing it in my supervision groups for helping professionals with body kindness right now. And it has to do with all around anti-oppression work. So that could be a great resource for this questioner. And as you're talking about these celebrity figures and everything like that, I think following trends and bringing in a relevant conversation, again, I know that there's a certain schedule and time is a difficult thing to find, but I don't know if you heard about Tess Holliday, who's like the international supermodel, and she put on Twitter, imagine just wanting to share photos of my kid and instead being told I'm unfit to be his mom because of my size. We aren't promised tomorrow regardless of our weight. And if I were to die tomorrow, both my boys would know how loved they were and what a badass their mom was. And she shared a picture from Instagram from people who said, you're going to die and not see him grow up. That's really sad. Your child should be more than enough reason to start taking care of yourself. You won't be here long if you stay the way you are. I mean, literally verbal abuse. And this is a white, higher weight woman who has economic privilege and celebrity status. And I get that you can't avoid idiots, but she's doing a great job trying to help those of us who have thin privilege see, like, this is a day-to-day occurrence. And so when you're a teacher in a high school setting, right, bringing up conversations around who gets to be a supermodel, who gets to be on magazine covers, showing Tess Holliday on Cosmo, allowing students to give gut reactions and showing these things where having your kids think, why would somebody treat her that way or say she's going to die? Delving into where there is evidence of that, where there is bias. And obviously, something like that can't just be like, hey, here's a Friday afternoon thing for you. It would have to be really structured and organized and part of something educational. And you really want to also think about your marginalized folks in the room, because in having some of these conversations, they could be really painful as well. So it's not something to just like, oh yeah, let me just show this Instagram thing. You do want to plan and prepare on structuring how do you have conversations about oppression, about the oppression of diet culture? That's where the question was coming in at. But it has so many other really powerful intersections. So I really appreciate you asking the question. And I think I think we gave you some homework, so to speak. What do you think, Bernie?
Melissa, we definitely did. And again, just thank you for being that teacher and for helping to guide our future. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of work to do. Let's go ahead. We have one more question. So I want to go ahead and jump in with that really quick. Question 3 comes from Marina. She asks, I'm learning about intuitive eating and loving the philosophy. I'm a mental health therapist and want to incorporate it in my work, but I'm still struggling to fully incorporate it into my life. Do you recommend that healers be fully trained in intuitive eating before we use it in our practice? Or could we do both at the same time? Also, where exactly can I be trained or certified in this? Thanks.
Well, thanks so much for the question. I wanted to make sure because, there's a couple things that I think are really important. One is for any listener to realize that a lot of times we think that helping professionals are like gods, right? Especially doctors, right? But even like my dietitian or my therapist, and we're humans too, right? We are all learning and growing and working on ourselves. We're doing the best we can every day, but we're a product of our education, right? And there's racism in our education. There's white privilege in our education. So just generally speaking, I wanted for any listener who isn't a helping pro or whatnot, like how do I make sense to get a helpfulness of this question? Understand that we all are going to need other people, right? I think Body Kindness is a great book. The reflections are great. Book club it. But I also bet you're going to have a doctor. Maybe you're going to see a dietitian or do some sort of course that is totally trustworthy, health at every size informed, or maybe you're going to connect with others. That there is an element of you doing your own work, and know that people who you're seeking help from are also doing their own work. And so just keep in mind a sense of what am I looking for in a helping professional, and ones who have credentials that show that your values align. And so these would be things like people who are willing to say that they're health at every size informed. That would be a plus. People who have the certification as an intuitive eating helping professional, I will include that link in the show notes. So this is something that I did early on, like one of the first years it was created, and it has grown. It has grown so much that I'm going to go through the recertification because I want to see what Evelyn and Elise have that's new, and there's now a test involved. But I can highly recommend that because the co-creators of intuitive eating manage all of that. I don't think that you have, because when is the end point anyway, right? Like, I don't think that you have to say, oh, I can't even begin to talk to people about compassion toward their bodies because I'm still working on trusting my own eating patterns. I think that ultimately, like you would go into any client session, the goals of doing no harm. And so I would be careful to engage in work that you don't feel equipped to engage in. But it sounds like you want to do this certification, which you could do. I also do supervision for helping professionals. So my mentor program is already, like the group mentor program that's 10 months, that's already going for this year. But I do private supervision. So you could do supervision with me. I'll include a link. The mindful dietitian, Fiona Sutherland, also has a link of people who do supervision. So I'll make sure I include that. I'll include the Intuitive Eating Pro certification. But working on yourself is going to help you with your own well-being enhancement, and it's going to give you a lot more confidence and skills. I think even in ways where you might use body kindness in your counseling work with people, like the spiral ups are there, the reflections are there, photocopy those, have clients get the book, do some of those things with them. That is a structure that you could be doing in your own life, but you also could be using in a way to help clients. And what I would say is, I would hate to think that there's a person who, as you say, is loving the philosophy and who works in mental health, but who doesn't take action to move forward because you're afraid that you're not going to be good enough. Because trust me, for every one of you, there are thousands of mental health therapists who actually say they treat obesity and eating disorders. And if people are doing that, I'm not going to publicly shame you, but you need to stop and you need to turn that ship around, because that does not help people. That's not a real thing. We should not be doing that. And there are plenty of mental health therapists who are fine doing weight loss programs. They think that's the right thing to do. And you have unique skills that only you can help others. Yes, you clearly need to learn and grow because you're working on yourself, and that's fine. Hopefully the resources I give you will be helpful. Don't delay this personal work, and don't delay the work you do with others. What's really going to help you is when you get supervision, because you'll be able to talk client cases, and through that supervision, you'll learn more about how to do better at it while you get help and support in your current caseload. So again, all those links that can help you are available in the show notes, and I wish you the best of luck.
Absolutely. I just want to thank all of our listeners who submitted questions. Sara, Melissa, Marina, thank you so very much. And remember, if you guys are listening in and want to submit a question, please do so at bodykindnessbook.com/question.
And that's our show. The podcast is made possible with support from listeners. Please donate to help offset production costs at gofundme.com/bodykindness. And please rate and review the show when you have a moment. It really matters. Let's keep the conversations going on Facebook. Search Body Kindness and request to join the group for Body Kindness readers and listeners. Have a question for us to answer on a future episode? Visit bodykindnessbook.com/question. Body Kindness books and audiobooks are available wherever books are sold. To request a signed print copy, visit bodykindnessbook.com/order. For other questions about this podcast, please email info@bodykindnessbook.com.